I guess one of the things that we're going to do today is that we're going to review some of the information that we went over on Thursday. And what I want to do is, number one, let's just go ahead and start out. Does anyone have any questions based off of the conversation that we had on Thursday? Does anyone have any questions? No questions. Okay, so let me kind of get into one of the programs. So one of the things that we did discuss last Thursday was some of the programming that IIKDS is providing as far as the master's or the graduate studies program. And this is the master's certificate that we're offering. And I went over some of the curriculum and some of the subject matter that we're going to cover. So I went over everything from the different geological studies that we're participating in, some of the ecological studies, a lot of the integral the integrated methods that we're using in order to tie in aspects of the spiritual geological studies and the spiritual ecological studies. I did discuss a little bit about the integral methodology. And then I think I very briefly discussed some of the aspects of the components of spirit conversation. And in dealing with some of the components of spirit conversation, I received a very interesting question that was posted in our Facebook group yesterday, and the question was concerning the ancestors. And the person who I'll go ahead and just make them anonymous now, however, they asked the question, how important is it to involve the ancestors in your daily practice or in your spiritual work? So I think one of the things that we can go ahead and discuss this morning, we're going to go ahead and discuss the ancestors. And this is going to be relevant because within a few days, you are going to see we have another program coming up. It's an ancestral course. And this ancestral course is going to deal with some of the factors that I'm discussing now. It may not deal with all of them, but it's going to get you in the door so that you can start to deal with some of these concepts. Now, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the concepts of calling on the ancestors, but what I will tell you is first I'll start off by telling you a little story. And then we can go ahead and get into some of the deeper aspects of calling on the ancestors. But I want to, be 100% honest with you. My journey and how I began and how I got myself to become a chief, how I became a Tindanana, which means a land priest, or a Bulanana, which means a controller of the gods. It started from me calling on my ancestors. And this was before I was traveling to the continent. This was before I really got involved with a lot of those things. I first started calling on my ancestors. And the truth of the matter is that, it was very simple. I began to call on my ancestors, and just within a matter of weeks of me calling on my ancestors, I began to see what most people would identify as coincidence. I would see these moments of synchronicity where it appeared to me that there were somehow related incidences that were happening that were somehow connected to what it is that I was doing as far as calling on my ancestors. And I think that all of us have felt those type of moment-to-moment interconnected sequences of events that seem somehow to be connected. However, we're not quite sure exactly how they're connected or why they're connected, but we just know that there's something to that. And there are a lot of us have given that the word coincidence. Well, that's one of the things that started happening for me. And before you know it, I had called on my ancestors. I had asked them to help me because I had read some material from some type of Revelations books that I were reading. I'm not talking about religious study. This was an esoteric manuscript that I was reading that was talking about calling on my ancestors, and I did exactly what it described in the book, and it was telling me, look, call on your ancestors, talk to them like you're just talking to a normal person that's sitting right next to you. So I began to do that, and as I called on them, I asked them, I said, link me back to my original power, link me back to what it is that's going to give me strength, what's going to give me vitality in my spiritual identity, who I am, who my ancestors are, where my strength lies. And like I said, before you know it, I was meeting different people from different countries that I've never met before. And literally months later, I was in Africa. I was in Ghana, and I was sitting in front of very high political figure, a Jinwada, a queen of the witches, sitting in front of this woman, and my journey had then began. And if you want to get a chance, I have some other tapes that are old, from 5 or 6 years ago, where I kind of get into that whole story. And you could always refer to those, and I'll post some of those on the site so that you can get a chance to get more about that story. But this is what I want to explain to you guys about the ancestors. When you deal with calling on your ancestors, it's like understanding the fundamentals of a tree. Your ancestors are the root of your tree. If you want to use an analogy and you want to look at who you are, if you are a stem or if you are a leaf on that tree, your ancestors are the root. So they are a chain that links you mother to mother, father to father, blood to blood, seed to seed, all the way back to what most people call your original star, or some people call your original soul seed. But what this is identifying in traditional culture is that we talk about the Noliwuni. And I know that you've heard me talk about the Noliwuni before, which is your personal God, or it is your personal star, which I'll review this. Your personal star is the spiritual components of who and what you are that exist both in you. However, they also extend into the exterior environment, meaning that they also exist in the outer realities or reflections of nature. And as I've said many times, you can imagine a wheel, and you spin that wheel very quickly. And as you spin that wheel very quickly, as we've discussed before, the spokes on that wheel appear to become stationary. However, we know that they're not stationary. The truth of the matter is that they're moving so quickly that they're able to appear to exist in many places at the same time. And that's why it looks like the spokes are stationary. Well, nature, environment, landscapes, landforms, and so forth, and other components, whether you're dealing with geological components, whether you're dealing with other ecological components, meaning that you're dealing with the life forms and so forth that exist in the environment that are birthed by the land, they are moving extremely quickly. And more specifically, speaking about the landforms and the geological aspects that produce these landforms or these landscapes, they are moving so quick that they actually exist as components inside of you, in addition to them also being a seemingly stationary component that exists in nature. This is what we call the Noliwuni. So there are some of you that have components of specific landscapes that exist in you. There are some of you that some of the spiritual components of who you are by certain rivers. There are some that are by certain hillsides. There are some that are by certain urban environments. There are some, and these are all some of the components that exist in you. And then you've heard about I'm going to give you an example. If you want to, because we discussed this last week about, well, how does this tie into a lot of ancient culture? Because I described to you about how the Dagomba and how the Shitobu clans and how some of these Mantambo clans, how they have an intricate relationship to ancient Egypt. And I told you about what we call the Nabihi, okay? And like I said before, when I get on a roll, you guys may have to review this tape because we're going to have we'll have a copy for you guys on the site in the next few days so that you guys can review this. But the royals the royals of the Dagombas out of the northern region. The royals out of the northern region come from the old kingdom of Ghana. Now, most people don't understand the historical context here, okay? But the historical context is that the old kingdom of Ghana is not in current Ghana. The old kingdom of Ghana would be where Senegal or Mali and those areas was. And there was a kingdom there called the Old Kingdom of Ghana that actually existed for 1,000 years. Even according to modern estimates, it existed from around 240. And this is according to modern estimates. Now, we know that they are not very modest in their estimates, but even according to them, it existed from like 242 AD all the way into 12 AD. And it did not die or fade out into the Arabid or the invasion of certain Muslim cultures that were coming in from the north that invaded in. So it existed for over 1,000 years. This culture in the Old Kingdom of Ghana was actually an extension, a Western extension of the Eastern capital, which was Kemet, or was Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. So the Western Sahara was a port for the capital in the Eastern Sahara. So the Old Kingdom of Ghana was an extension of Egypt itself. It was the Egypt of the West, and it was a place where a lot of the indigenous communities from Egypt, especially a lot of the indigenous African community, indigenous Africans, they began to migrate from the Eastern Sahara due to the colonialization of that area, and they began to migrate through the Sahara from the eastern, and they traveled over to the western, and they created this capital there called the Old Kingdom of Ghana. The Dagombas traveled from Egypt. They traveled from places like Chad, Egypt, Sudan. They traveled over, and they came into the Old Kingdom of Ghana as the warriors. They were the keepers of these secrets. But the royals were called what they call the Nebihi. But in Egypt, they were known as Neb. That's N-E-B, Neb. But when you go and you look at the Metroneter, you see that the Neb or the Nebi in ancient Egypt it's a word that means the masters. Okay? Now, let's rewind, because I have to give you a lot of historical context so that you can understand the cultural anthropology of the Dagombas and why this information, when I'm introducing the concept of nature identity, why it's so profound and why it's so important. So I was just explaining to you about the concept of, you got to follow me now, I just explained to you about the concept of what we call the Noliwuni. The Noliwuni was your personal star or personal God, meaning the representative of yourself that exists in various aspects of nature, in addition to existing in components that exist within your very being. Now, some of these components, someone may ask, well, okay, how exactly could it be that I have components of a specific landscape or a specific landform that exists inside of me as a human being? How is it that I have a component of a mountain, a river, or a valley, a rocky terrain, a swamp? How do I have these components inside of me and I'm a human being? Well, in ancient Kemet or in ancient Egypt, this concept was a very real identity, and it went throughout the schools. It was known specifically in the schools of what we call Khnum. Now, if you get a chance to study Khnum, if you see and this is what the Nebihi, the Nebs, this is the information that we're bringing over. If you look at the concept of Khnum, okay, and you'll see Khnum with having like a type of ram type head. It's a type of ram that's extinct, and you see him sitting in front of what we call the potter's wheel. And according to quote unquote Egyptologists that explain this, however, let me identify, they're explaining this from the exterior perspective. They're not explaining it from an interior perspective. This is why I'm giving it to you. This is the interior perspective that they don't have here. But the interior perspective is that he's sitting at the potter's wheel. The reason why he's sitting at the potter's wheel is because there were societies of people that existed that knew that when women are pregnant, that they're able to extract aspects of the environment through their nose. And I don't know if you understand, and this isn't just the physical, biological workings or physiology of a woman, but in addition to the practice of Timbukata, women were taken to specific landscapes during their pregnancy or during the periods of gestation, and they were able to extract. I don't know if those of you who are women here, you know, when you get pregnant, your nose get bigger. You're able to smell a scent from a mile away. Why is that? It's because as a woman, you're able to actually extract some of the particles, the components that exist within the environment in order to make up components of your child. So the clans of Khnum, which, by the way, let me be clear. When you start looking at Khnum, you'll see that he has a wife by the name of Satis. These were the ancient water gods of ancient Egypt. So these were male and female aspects of what most people identify now as Mami Wata. However, this science here was the science of, this is why he's at the potter's wheel, it was the science of extracting the Noliwuni, or the star, from the environment. And there were societies that existed that were literally responsible for resurrecting the gods. And what I mean by resurrecting the gods, these were the clans of Khnum, or these were the clans of what we call the Noliwuni, that come from what we call the Nebi, or the Nabihi, or the Inyaba, which was the ways of the grandfather and the ways of the grandmother. And this was the ancient way of resurrecting the gods, because they knew that the gods, or what most people are calling the gods, are aspects that exist in the hidden subdivisions of nature and exist between these moment to moment, which we were describing before, which are piecing together these seemingly connected, what most people are calling coincidences. So when you deal with the star here and the Noliwuni, and how this ties into ancestors is that you yourself have a star. You yourself have various components that exist in nature that exist in you. However, when we go back to the structure of the tree, and we go back to the structure of your ancestors are the root of that tree, meaning that they are pulling. A tree does what? It gets its nutrients from a lot of different sources, but what are two main sources from what? They get it from the sky, and it gets it from the ground, right? So here we go back down to the geological studies, and we go back to the earth. It's extracting certain nutrients or components from the earth. The same as you and your family and your bloodline, that chain, that link, that links you back to certain qualities and to certain aspects that exist within nature, which are a part of your family chain, but which are a part of your family root. And so your ancestors, which exist in you, in your blood, and then also exist in nature, in the spiritual world, they exist in two places. They are like the root. And as you call or you link back into them, they begin to tie you back in to your source, or they begin to tie you back into not only to your star or to the spiritual components of who you are, but then they tie you back into the star of the family as a whole. Because your whole family or your whole clan, which is a chain, which is the roots of the tree that exists in the ground or in the earth, have a star in itself, or Noliwuni, meaning that your whole family has a spiritual identity. Not just you, but your whole family. Now, where am I going with this? And why is this important when it comes to understanding how to connect to your ancestors? And I'm going to explain to you why it's important. It's important because what most people, give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. What most people are describing as psychic abilities, what most people are describing as characteristic traits, personality traits, qualities that are extraordinary, supernatural, or what most people would call extrasensory perception, precognition, All of these wonderful names that these people have given, what most people call quote-unquote psychic abilities, people really have not understood what they really are. And I'm letting you know that calling on your ancestors is the first real step to understanding what most people call psychic abilities. This is what people aren't going to tell you. They'll tell you that calling on your ancestors is nothing more than a way of dealing with idolatry or dealing with some type of idol worship. But what I'm telling you is that when you call on your ancestors, when you call on your bloodline, you're connecting to interior components that exist within yourself that are a chain, like the roots on a tree. And if you are a tree and you are the stem or the leaf of the tree and your roots are not correct, your tree will wither away. It will have no real power or have no real substance that it can draw from. But when you start to call on your ancestors, you connect to that root and you're able to pull the nutrients from the land. And what I'm explaining to you is that what most people are calling characteristic traits, personalities, and so forth, according to our traditional perspectives, personality traits, qualities that most people are familiar with that exist in human beings, they really do not originate in human beings. See, in the Western culture, we have gotten things, according to Western perspectives, according to a lot of European perspectives. And what I would like to add here is that indigenous African perspectives are quite different. And a lot of indigenous perspectives are different altogether. And where you may deal with a psychologist that deals in the concepts of behaviorism, and they will identify behaviors and personality traits and characteristics, according to indigenous perspective, those personality traits, characteristics originate from the land. They originate from the land. They originate from the land, and in addition, then they also reflect within the ecological community as a whole, which are nothing more than reflections or personalities of the land. So if you were to take a common look at an ecosystem, you would understand that according to the traditional perspective, an ecosystem and the life forms that exist in the ecosystems are nothing more than reflections of the landform itself. So then if you begin to look at life forms that exist within a particular environment, the origin of their strength comes from the land that produced them. That's why they have similar characteristics. You have certain characteristics that exist within the environment that are dominant. You have some that are less dominant, but those all are reflections of the characteristics or the personality traits that exist within that particular environment. So in understanding your personality traits, your qualities, and your psychic abilities, in the traditional perspective, we have an understanding that any quality, any personality trait that you may find or that may exist in the environment, we have the ability through what we call traditional medicine, Tima Bukata, through Tima, through the understanding of roots, medicine, herbs, and components of the ecological, organic materials that exist in ecological environment, we're able to piece those characteristics together and then graft them onto yourself. This is Khnum sitting at the potter's wheel. This is Khnum grafting a being. But the truth, what we're doing here is in Tima Bukata, we're actually grafting the God, resurrecting the God, because we understand that what most people call its personality traits or characteristic traits that give you your individualism are really their home doesn't exist in human beings, it exists in nature. So with the understanding of nature, we're able to collect any characteristic trait, attributes, or movement, or action. So any action that would exist in the environment, whether it be from a storm, whether it be from the vitality and from the growth and the maturity of the spring season of existence, all of those things can be cultivated and can be added as a personality trait or an extension or a power that a person can hold. This is traditional knowledge. So what happens with your ancestors is that when you begin to call on your ancestors, you begin to tie in to your family traits. Now, what happens is that people within the family, you may have certain people in your family. It may even be you. This may be even the reason why you're on this call, who have certain characteristic traits. You have certain abilities, psychic abilities, as most people would like to call them. Most people think that, oh, well, these abilities, they originate from me, or I just have them, or some people that have somewhat insight, they may say, well, I've inherited it from my mother, or I inherited it from my grandmother. She was a great psychic, or my grandfather, or whatever. But what I'm telling you is that it's a chain. These characteristic traits or personality attributes that give you these abilities are really specific spirits that exist, that travel through your blood and through your bloodline. And they give you this knowledge through through your mind and through your mentality. And really quick, so we can understand how that works, it's simple. These beings that we're describing as spirits, these are really nothing more than the mental energy or the mind activity that exists within the environment. And this is the same mental activity that's responsible for giving life and vitality to specific forms of life that exists within these environments. Whether you're dealing with the aspects of the land which are responsible for actually producing biomass or material in the environment, which gives life to what most of us are familiar with as far as specific life forms. So, before I put the cart before the horse, what I'm explaining to you is that your ancestors and you calling on your ancestors is the first step that is necessary for you to reconnect to your true power, to reconnect through the interior aspect of who you are and to tie back into the roots of your family tree. And by tying into the roots of your family tree, you then will begin to access some of the interior spiritual power that has existed throughout your bloodline. And then you begin to then have access to that power and to those abilities. Now, a lot of people will tell you, oh, well, when I started calling on my ancestors, I then began to have my grandmother, appear to me in my dreams, or my grandfather, or some person. But then after I began to become more intuitive because what's really happening is that they're bringing these things to you. And the truth is that at that point, according to certain ways and certain rituals and certain things that can be done, and these are some of the things that we're going to discuss in the ancestral class that's coming up, is that you are able to actually call on the most powerful people that exist within your bloodline. You're able to call on them. You're able to call on those abilities, and you can literally get those abilities, and you can literally access those traits. The same way a branch can access the nutrients and the vitality that the roots are pulling from the ground or from the land. This is the reason why calling on the ancestors is so important. Because you are literally connecting to the root. And it is the root of the tree that pulls the nutrients from the land. Remember when I told you in traditional perspectives, in the concepts of Timbuktu, the geological aspects or dealing with the land or the landforms is one of the basis of understanding spirit. It's one of the basis of understanding some of these concepts. And if you are using observation, you see that plants and trees are rooted in the land. And they are, in essence, they are extensions of the land. And this is the last time I'm really going to talk about some of these things in a public forum. I really would like to teach more about some of these concepts, but it's going to have to be in a structured educational setting, because it's not information to just put out there so that people can regurgitate and use as being something that sounds deep. This is actually connected to a real lineage of knowledge, and that's what I'm trying to identify with you when I show you the cultural continuity between what the Dagomas are practicing through Timbuktu and nature identity, and what was practiced by the clans of Khnum that were in ancient Egypt. that had temples all along the Niles going all the way up into Aswan or Sudan or Nubia. This is where most of the temples of Satis are. They're all along the Niles of Aswan, which were dealing with Satis, which was the feminine aspect of the water spirits. And then Khnum, most people don't understand that. They see Khnum and Satis and they say, oh, this is the potter, the molder. But no, when you do research, you'll see that Khnum was a water god. And that priests such as Imhotep and even Zosa, if you go look, there are certain stelas that talk about in ancient Egypt. It talks about the famine that existed in ancient Egypt and how Zosa, one of the famed pharaohs of ancient Egypt, how he went to his priest Imhotep, and Imhotep had to go and consort Khnum. And he did so. He received certain dreams. He came back, and they had to do purifications and sacrifices. And they brought animals. They brought perfumes. They brought all these things, and they brought it to the Nile River and put it into the Nile River. So what I'm explaining here is that these principles that we're teaching at IIKDS, they have real connection to what most people have been trying to identify with as ancient Egypt. Real. And there is a cultural continuity that exists between these cultures that were in that part of Africa at one point in time and that migrated into another part of Africa, in West Africa, migrated from the Eastern Sahara over to the Western Sahara. There's real historical proof of the cultural continuity between, the old kingdom of Ghana and ancient Egypt. Okay? And this cultural continuity is still kept and is still held by the Dagomba, by the clans of Shitobu, by the clans of Mantambo. These are all clans within the Dagomba, by the Masi, which the Masi, if anyone has got a chance to read the Chancellor Williams' Destruction of a Black Civilization, The Great Issues of Race, from years 2000 on up to modern day or something along those lines, I believe that's the name of the title, he specifically talks about the Masi. And he talks about the Masi and says they are the ones with the great prophecy about they would never fall until they allowed foreigners to settle into their land. Or he talks about the Masi and describes them as some of the greatest warriors in African history. This is Chancellor Williams, a Rhodes Scholar, who describes the Masi. The Masi are the children of the Dagomba. The Dagomba, the Masi are a product of a Dagomba princess and a Mindi or Mandinka prince that came together and created the Masi. But in reality, there's a lot more to that. But the Masi are Dagombas. The Masi is literally a clan. It's an extension of the Dagomba culture. And what I'm explaining to you is that the Masi were known as warriors. The Dagombas are known as great warriors. And these warriors were the protectors. They were the tilers of the lodges. They were the protectors of the secrets. A lot of people have been told and they have been sold on the Knights of Templar and all these other type of people that come thousands of years later that are supposed to be the great protectors of the secrets of Jerusalem and da-da-da-da-da, and everyone has fallen into that. But what I would like to introduce to you as brothers and sisters, as far as your history, is that you had great protectors that were protectors of great knowledge, that were protectors of the great secrets that extend beyond what you think would be in Jerusalem or any of these places, that were in ancient Egypt, which were the true secrets that everybody were trying to get. And that everyone that colonialized those areas were all trying to achieve the great mysteries that existed there. And I'm telling you that the Dagombas were the great they were great warriors that were on horseback. They were the ones that protected those secrets and kept them secret and went all throughout West Africa. The Dagombas went all throughout that area and conquered a lot of places, even from conquering the Dogon. Even from all those people, the Dagomba were extremely dominant, and they were known as the protectors of the secret, and they held those secrets, and they kept them all the way into present day. all the way into present day. So I think that, just touching on a little bit of some of the cultural anthropology of the Dagombas and the history of some of these things is important so that you understand the cultural background of the people that you're going to learn this information from. There's a lot of people that will explain to you about why their spiritual perspectives are important. And I offer you that the Dagomba of the northern regions of Ghana's cultural identity is important because it is intimately connected to the history that the world has been idolizing as far as ancient Egypt. And it even extends, without getting too deep into it, it even extends over to the Americas and the Aboriginal culture, because the Dagomba and the Mandinka have an extremely interconnected culture. And anyone who reads things like Chancellor Williams, Clyde A. Winters, and so forth, they'll tell you that the Mandinka or the Mandingo culture has an intimate relationship with what you call the Olmecs or the She-Olmecs, which were in the southern Americas coming down, which were Native Americans that traveled all the way up from the natives from Southern America all the way up through Mexico, all the way up into Americas, into the Mississippi Valley and so forth, which were indigenous, black-skinned, curly-haired Native Aboriginal Americans, which were one of their cultural and spiritual identifying factor was what we call the Papadaga, or the dwarfs. And if you do any study about the ancient Olmecs and you look at their particular culture, you'll see that their identifying factor of their culture were the Papadaga, or were the dwarf, or were the what? Were the rain spirits, or the water spirits that were coming from the water, the Papadaga, the dwarfs, which I'm telling you, the dwarfs are still interconnected to the water spirits coming, the same water spirits that we were talking about with Satis and Khnum and so forth, because the dwarfs are the children, or Mami Wata's children, coming out of the water. So there is a historical relevance in the knowledge that we're teaching. The knowledge that's taught in these courses with IIKDS, in the master's course, the graduate studies course, which is a year-long course, that are intricately interrelated with a lot of the curriculums that we're creating, that are coming from a lot of these Bukuluku, Jinwada, Bulana, Bubihi people. These are the medicine men and medicine women out of the northern regions, Ghana, through the Gomba and so forth. We're creating these curriculums. We're putting together these courses and this information so that you could have it in its rawest form, in its most primary form. And I explained to you before that my job has been I've been sent in order to translate some of this information to you so that you're able to understand the cultural continuity, the relevance of some of these things that you're getting. But these are, let me explain to you, make no mistake about it, the teachings at IIKDS are the sacred teachings of ancient Egypt that still exist in West Africa through the clans of Mantembo and through the clans of Shitobu and through the clans of the Dagomba. This is important for you to understand and for you to know that a lot of the curriculum that we're teaching here, whether it's going to come through the ancestral course that you're going to see information coming up, whether it's coming through the Dream Warrior course that we have coming up, all of these courses, the Dream Warrior course, in addition to the ancestral course, the goal here would be to get you to understand the relevance so that you eventually want to participate in the master's course, which is the year-long course. One of my goals here has been to give you some relevant information. Unfortunately, and I was just discussing this not too long ago with a colleague of mine about the relevance of getting authentic information and how, look, as an individual that as a collective group and as an individual that's coming out and giving this, reintroducing this knowledge to groups of people, it's important to understand that I am thankful for the hard work and the time that a lot of other teachers have put into what it is that they've done. And if it wasn't for teachers such as them, then there wouldn't be a place for a person such as myself. However, I want to explain that there's a lot of you that have been involved in a lot of different schools that have been using the banner of indigenous spiritual teachings, and have been using the banners of even teachings that are still currently now, like Ifa, Santeria, Leukemia, Ocha, Kundumble, whatever. And you've gone to these teachers in order to learn real information. And unfortunately, a lot of you have stayed in these teachings for years and still do not understand basic fundamental concepts of the cultural identity, of the origin, and do not understand concepts that extend beyond systematic approach. And what I mean by that is that we now have to extend past the concept of systematic approach. And systematic approaches come from understanding specific principles that exist in nature. And from understanding nature identity, understanding some of these concepts, you're able to produce many systematic patterns or repetitive concepts that you're able to structure or you're able to model based on your observations of nature. Therefore, with a concept of nature identity, you could create another system which most people are familiar with. But a lot of us have not been able to get past certain systematic concepts. This is why a lot of people get stuck in what happens to be, and I'm going to be honest with you, a religious perspective of our traditional practice. This is the reason why someone that may exist in Leukemia, Ocha, Kondemble, Yoruba, whatever, even whatever, any cultural practice, and I don't want to just use those as an identifying factor. Let me give you an example. There's real knowledge in all of our traditions, whether they exist throughout the diaspora or they exist on the continent. We all have. So I don't want to pit one tradition against other. We are all valuable. There's no doubt about it. But what I'm introducing here is that if you learn principles, then it extends beyond a systematic expression of a principle. And that is the goal that I want to give you with the concepts of nature identity. This is the concept that we want to give you as far as myself, as far as some of the elders that are involved in the International Association of Traditional Elders, our association. This is what we want to show you. We want to show you principle. And with the principle, you can make many systems. You can make many expressions because you understand the base principle of nature. And with that principle, it's not about getting stuck in one particular perspective. It's the type of knowledge where if you are here in one place, you understand it because you can practice it. Or if you travel anywhere in the world, you're able to function with an intricate knowledge of the complexities of nature in order to deal or communicate with what we call Bukata, which is the world, soul, and spirit powers of the earth, which is what we all are dealing with. No matter the expression that we're trying to use, no matter the name that comes with the title, it's always been about dealing with Tim and Bukata, and this is the practice of the Goma, Tim or Tima, traditional medicine, roots, magic, Bukata, the spirits of protection, the world, soul, and the spirit powers of the earth. This has been the original practice that existed all across the planet, and it was the very knowledge that resurrected places like ancient Kemet. Which, let me be clear with you, when you really deal with the cultural anthropology of some of the Dagoma and so forth, you'll see that Egypt is not very old. And that knowledge in itself, was built off of the foundation of people in Chad, people in Sudan, people in Ethiopia, and other society and other empires that extend way beyond what most people think ancient Egypt was, and so forth. And so this is a knowledge that extends all the way back. And when we talk about the importance of when someone asked the question before, they said, well, how are you tying this all in? And I'm trying to explain to you the highest knowledge that a lot of these esoteric societies has always been talking to you about has been about dealing with the world soul, the spirit powers of the earth, or reflections of that, or the community of minds and mentalities that exist with not just in the earth, but within existence itself. Whether it be through any expression, whether you're dealing with astrology on down, it's all of the symbolism in a lot of your religious or monotheistic perspectives have all been centered around really dealing with nature. And they've given you characters, and they've given you physical components that lesser minds can identify with, which are nothing more than really symbols of things that are actually happening in the natural, that are happening in ecology, that are happening in nature. So I don't want you, whoever you may be, whoever is interested in participating in these courses, I don't want you to fall into the trap of saying, well, oh, wow, this information is extremely, quote unquote, primitive. Because I'm letting you know it's the primary that is responsible for creating many of the designs, many of the expressions, whether you deal with the monotheistic culture, whether you deal with what most people try and call pantheism, all these things are nothing more than expressions of our concepts of nature, identity. So let me go ahead before I talk anymore here. I'm going to open it up to answer any questions. If you guys don't have any questions, we're going to go ahead and cut it short today because I think that this is the most important thing, for me to answer. I've covered a lot of information here.
Yes, Chief.
So go ahead.
This is Taharka. I really appreciate what you just shared. In fact, I've gotten more out of this past 10 minutes than the day before, than the last Thursday. Let me tell you, because I swear you were like picking up all of my questions, and you were just picking them up. And one of the things that I really appreciate, in particular, is the fact that when you talked about the different traditions and how we as Africans, experience all the different traditions in the diaspora, that in particular, what you're speaking about is the fact that we can practice our traditions without necessarily being in a particular spiritual tradition or being partial, because that's usually what happens. We usually get segmented and divided off into all of our different spiritual traditions in the way that they came to us. And I really appreciate that. And the other thing is, one of my quests have been to really, and I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound, I don't want to come off the wrong way. Man, I'm sick of hearing the Kemet, because what I know is that there's, like you said, Kemet is an infant when we talk about our spiritual traditions.
Yes.
And one of the things, one of my quests are to really find out or to really explore the deeper roots of even what was Kemet. Where did we come out? Where were we prior to Kemet? What were we doing prior to Kemet? Right? What is the birth of Kemet? What is the origin of Kemet?
Right.
And and I really appreciate you sharing.
Well, thank you, Taharka, and I appreciate those kind words, and that's the goal here. The goal is to identify and to get to the root, and this is why I'm using the analogy of the tree, and to understand that a lot of these cultures that we've been studying have been maybe the trunk, they've been maybe a branch of the tree, But what is the root of the tree? Because understanding the root of the tree is going to explain and is going to identify the true nutrients that we're going to need in order to make us a strong structure. That's what we're going to need in order to pull the vitality of the water that exists within existence. We're able to pull that up and to get that vitality and those nutrients into our body. It's going to make our family trees. It's going to make them strong, and we're going to make that transition from trees that exist during the winter that are not bearing fruit, trees that do not have leaves, do not have their flowers. We're going to transition from those type of structures into trees that are blossoming, trees that are producing fruit, because we're able to extract the nutrients from the true source, which is the land, and it's the ground. And this is where the traditional title of what we call Tindana or a Tindana Paga. A Tindana means a land king, or Tindana Paga, it means a land queen. Or Tindana, it means a landlord of the spirits. It means one who has knowledge of the land. Then you have what comes before Tindana, which is Tinbihi. Tinbihi, it means a child of the land. It means getting back to the fundamental aspect of nature, which starts with the fundamental aspect of geology. It deals with the very fundamental aspect of dealing with the land, being a Tinbihi or Tinbihi Paga. Tinbihi really means a caretaker of the shrine. But it also translates, it means a child of the land. So we first as communities worldwide, is that we have to become children of the land again. We have to be children of the very source from which the tree extracts its nutrients. We have to become children of the land. And as becoming children of the land, we will then grow into Tindanana, land kings and land queens. Hence being the landlords, meaning that we will be the landlord of the spirits, because we understand the source. Do you understand? And let's just be clear, taking it off of an unesoteric reality, and we wanted to get just into a purely economic reality. The wealthiest people on the planet are landowners. They're the people that control the land. And I want you to understand that. Understand that from an economic perspective, that landowners, the people that own land and real estate, are the wealthiest and the most influential people on the planet. Now let's take it to our own cultural perspective and being a Timbihi, a child of the land, and then going back to our traditional concept of being a Tindana, a land king, a land queen, or what we call a landlord, being a lord of the land. You'll understand why. That once you become all those things, then you become what we call Bulana, Gabana. It means a controller of the gods. Now you can see how some of those concepts have been taken, and they also reflect, everything has a dual aspect. So then you can see, if we want to just step off of spiritual perspectives and esoteric talk here, we could talk purely economics, and you can see how those who control the land have really been controlling the gods. Do you see how that works? So this is what we're talking about as far as the primary concepts here. What we're discussing here is that going back to the land. And by you controlling, being a Bulana Paga, controller of the gods, by you being a landlord or a land king or a land priest or land priestess, by you being a child of the land, you then control the gods, what we call the Tigabani, the gods of the land, or the Wu No Nam, the gods of our ancestors that exist in nature. And hence you become a controller of the gods. Everything has its reflection. So if you wanted to get off of the spiritual tip and person who wanted to talk purely economics, you could explain it the same way. And this is why I'm trying to tell you, because these concepts, they reverberate throughout the natural design of things, as above, so below. So you can see how those who own real estate and those who own the land have really controlled the gods for quite some time. So our goal here at IIKDS, the International Indigenous Knowledge and Development Society, through our courses, through our structured learning platform that is hands-on, our goal is to reintroduce you as a child of the land. In order to be a child of the land, then you become like Haru, who then begins to suckle on the breast of your mother in order to get the vitality and strength, in order to reclaim the new Egypt, in order to reclaim the new kingdoms of the world, in order to overtake the disagreeable, elements that may exist in any type of aspect, in order to overcome those aspects, in order to become the king, Tindana, or the Tindana, the land king or the landowner. I'm trying to explain to you that a lot of these analogies, a lot of these stories are going to be important for you to understand, and they were important for us to know. But like we described, let's just talk about. Yeah. So let me get off that, because I don't want to go too deep into it. But I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about. This is the goal. This is the goal with our courses. This is the goal with you guys getting involved in our forums. We're going to have discussions such as these. Not all the discussions are going to be like this. And the truth is that I'm not really going to put myself out on platforms too many times in order to speak about some of these matters, because I don't want people to cling to what I'm saying instead of wanting to learn the aspects of these things so that they can pass this knowledge on to their family. So in order for you to really get this knowledge, for you to get this information, you're going to have to participate in a lot of the things that we have going on in the community. To get involved in some of our community functions, get involved in some of these retreats that we're putting together, get involved in some of these classes that we're putting together. The ancestral class that we have coming up very soon, our class, Becoming a Dream Warrior, that the deadline for participating in is going to be, in about a week or so. Our graduate studies courses and everything else that we're providing. This is the way that I felt that's going to be a responsible way in order to secrete this information to the community. I would love to just put it out. First of all, let me explain. It cannot be done in an intellectual armchair type of environment. That's not how these things work. Tradition and Timambukata and this type of knowledge is best absorbed in the laboratory of nature and in the realms of experience. You have to experience. You have to have hands-on. You have to deal with these things on a hands-on basis in order to learn these things. And this is why, even though we're presenting IIKDS as an online platform, and there are certain forums that we're going to discuss, and there's certain things that we're going to do online, but all of our class materials and all those things are all hands-on. All these things are shipped to you. You're using these things. You're working with your hands. You're going out in nature. You're observing. You're doing all these things. This is the only way that you can truly understand this knowledge. It cannot be relayed any other way. So I would encourage you, whoever is listening to this and whoever is going to listen to this in the future, is that there has to be a time where you're going to take your knowledge base outside of the philosophical perspective, and you're going to have to deal with it on an operative level. And if you're just understanding it from a speculative perspective, you're only going to get half of the knowledge. You're going to have to get to a point where you're taking that knowledge and you're actually putting your hands in the dirt. You're actually dealing with the raw materials and so forth of nature. And when you start doing that, you're going to understand what has been written or what has been talked about, because this is them giving you their experiences and them writing it down, them documenting it, and then regurgitating it for you. But the only way you're really going to know that is to become a student. And this is a message that I have for everyone out there who's listening to this. You cannot be afraid of becoming a student again. The only thing that's going to hold you back is your fear of becoming a student again. There are a lot of us out there that have a lot of expertise in a lot of subjects, and we are extremely comfortable in our expertise. So much so that the idea of getting involved into a subject where you no longer are at the top and you have to start off as a child does not seem desirable. And this is the reason why a lot of us have not got a chance to really deal with this knowledge. Because a lot of us are so comfortable in this esoteric, quote-unquote, conscious knowledge that we have gotten that we don't want to have to start over again. And what I'm telling you is that you're not going to have to start over again. The knowledge that you have acquired over years of study, over years of reading all the books and putting all this information together is going to be the very foundation which is going to help you to translate a lot of the information that you're going to learn from your practical knowledge. And it is what is going to differentiate you between those who have not taken the time to do that study. So don't think that everything that you learned you have to put by the wayside. That is not true. Everything that you learned will become an addition to what you already know. And those that have taken the time to become experts in many other fields, when you take the time to become a student again of traditional knowledge, of Timbuktu, when you can become a child of the land again, once you grow into a land king or land queen, and then when you can grow into becoming a Bulanapaga, controller of the gods, then all that past knowledge, all that past research, and in addition to the research, moreover, even the research that you're going to do even after that or during those times of your observation and your study is all going to go towards who are going to be the better teachers, who are going to be able to more appropriately disseminate this information in a way that can be understood to the masses and to the general public. So my charge to you guys out there is that don't be afraid to get involved in something that you know very little about, especially when you can listen to what I'm saying and hopefully down the line you'll do your own research and you'll see what I'm explaining to you is the truth. This is the reason why I've come to give you this information. All of the information that you've gotten from your current teachers. And I want you to understand this, and this is not said out of arrogance. This is said out of understanding the very aspects of nature and understanding what nature is. Nature has cycles and it has seasons. You have a birth, growth, maturity, non-growth, decline, and death that exists in nature. This is a very fundamental principle of nature. All things have their cycles and all things have their seasons. What I'm explaining to you is that the teachers that have come before have been there to get you to this point. It's going to be people such as myself and people that are coming after me that are going to be able to take you from where you currently stand to take you to where you really want to go. Because what you really have been getting thus far has been the ticket that will get you into the door, that will re-scramble the intricate complexities of these illusions that have been given to you through various imagery, through certain dogmatic belief systems and so forth. Now you're having the intellect. Now you have the ability to become thinkers to the point where you're able to recognize there is more to what's out there than just who is first, who is this, who is that, who is this person, who is this, who are the Egyptians, who are the Moors, who are the Sumerians, who is this, what more is there? Then you have to start realizing, what made these societies? What made these cultures? What made them powerful? How did they become powerful? How did they come to the knowledge that they have? I don't want to just know about their gods. I don't want to just know about what they did and what they built and what time period they may have lived in and maybe who they influenced. I want to know what made them powerful, what gave them the mind or the mentality to do what they did, to create what they did, to express their cultural identity the way that they did, to build the civilizations the way that they did. What was their belief system? And what was their belief system according to the interior perspectives of people that have a real connection? Not what was their belief system and what was their beliefs coming from groups that have what Cheikh Anta Diop would call, or suffering from what they call, it's not suffering from, but it's a phenomenon, what they call cultural invariance, which have an inability to understand the psychological interior components of what's being said. And this is why I'm telling you it's going to be important for you, even if you don't understand this knowledge, to learn it from an interior perspective. If you want to know what the ancient Africans were learning, you're going to have to dig deep into the interior of indigenous African perspectives. There's no way that you can understand the psychological dynamics, the imagery, the symbolism of a culture, of a group, from observing it from an exterior perspective. It's impossible, because you will not have the psychological understanding of the interior psychological dynamics. So if you don't understand the psychological dynamics of the interior, and you can't be a person that's coming from an exterior perspective and say, oh, this people are thousands of years, this is the cup, this is what it means, based on the psychological understanding that you have of a cup. Their psychological understanding of that object may be is totally different than what you think it is. But what's happening and what we're dealing with now is we're dealing with people that are giving their perspectives, and they're from an exterior, third-person, objective type of observation, and they don't have any real interior knowledge of the interior design. And this is why I'm telling you it's so important for you to not to just understand it from the Dagombas, but to understand it from any interior perspective of indigenous cultures that exist within Africa, if you want to understand the real interior perspectives that are being taught there. That is the only way that you can do it. If you're looking for someone that's in France, or that's in Italy, or that's from another exterior culture to tell you what the people in Africa were thinking and doing when they share a different cultural identity and a cultural outlook or perspective, you're getting misled. And this is why I'm telling you, a lot of us have been misled by these Egyptologists and these archaeologists and these anthropologists that are trying to tell you what you were thinking. A person can't tell you what you're thinking. A person can't observe you and tell you this is what you're thinking, because that's a concept of phenomenology. That is an interior perspective that cannot be known. They can only observe behavior, and then they think they observe behavior, and then give you their analysis on the behavior that they observe objectively. They can't tell you the subjective aspect that's happening within the interior dynamics of your brain. It's impossible. So this goes back to the very first concept for anyone. Know thyself. And you're going to have to understand African indigenous perspectives from inside of the mind of those that are in the interior cultural dynamics of these practices. That is the only way. You can't learn it any other way. And this is the reason why it's so important that we have, myself, and that we have an association of traditional scientists that are willing and that are ready to teach you secrets that have been kept and that have been passed from mouth to ear for arguably millions of years, that have been passed down from family to family, that have passed through ancient cultures such as Egypt and that have existed even before then. And this is what our goal is at IIKDS. These are what our programs are centered around. It's a real educational path. It's a structured educational path to relay this information. That's the only way we can do it. It's the only way that it can be done. And if you're willing to educate yourself the same way that you are willing to educate yourself if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be an attorney, if you want to be a nurse, whatever it may be, you take the time to educate yourself in order to become those things. You're going to have to do the same. This is not something that you can learn by listening to a couple of conscious tapes or a couple cool videos that you may see. It's not going to happen. If you want to be an engineer, if you want to be a spiritual engineer, you're going to have to go to school. You're going to have to do the same thing that was done in our ancient cultures, and this is what these schools were. When you look and you see about any of these schools, whether it be the schools of Pythagoras in Greece, or it be the schools of Herodotus, whether it be the schools in ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt, whether it be the schools of Imhotep, whether it be the schools of Hattaru, the schools of Har, the schools of Isis, the schools of Aset, the school of any of these were all schools. These were educational institutions where people came from around the world in order to learn, in order to study, in order to understand the intricacies, the complexities of nature, and then from that became, wonderful expressions of mathematics, science, ecology, geology. All these things that most people are familiar with now came from these esoteric teachings. And this is the reason why, without getting off into a tangent, we're going to go ahead and close here. This is the reason why a lot of your scholars that are introducing a lot of these postmodern concepts all come from different esoteric schools. And believe me, they do. Because a lot of the foundation of these subject matters that a lot of people have been learning have come from these esoteric perspectives. Believe me. So you do the research yourself and see all these people that supposedly have come up with these supposed theories that have been found in modern and postmodern contemporary art forms and sciences, and see where these people come from. See if they don't come from places like Rosicrucians and all these other golden, the Hermetica, the Golden Dawn, and all these other esoteric groups that exist, and see if they're not members of these. You'll soon find that they are. And the reason is because these esoteric groups have been the holders of a lot of these groups. And like I told you, a lot of these esoteric groups have their home in indigenous African teachings. And this is why Egypt, because it's an identified fact, this is why it was so sought after. And it was colonized in so many ways, and its knowledge was taken and disseminated in so many different places. And this is what I'm telling you. You have a real source of understanding the knowledge through IIKDS. So in conclusion, I would love you guys to take the time to look at some of the courses that we're going to have. We're going to start posting a lot of the courses on our Facebook group. We're going to post a lot of our courses on the website. We're creating a Google account, so we'll have a Google account. We'll have a Hangout. We'll have a lot of different platforms. We're going to have a YouTube page. We have a lot of platforms that we're creating where we're going to get this information to you guys, and we're going to let you know exactly what we're doing in the community. So please stay tuned to that. Do I have any more questions? Are there any more questions? Well, in that case, I thank you guys for taking the time to get up on this morning and listen to me. talk. I encourage you guys to do your research. I encourage you guys to re-listen to this broadcast because we're going to post it on our site. I really encourage you guys to do this because it's going to give you an interesting perspective on some of the things you may have been taught thus far. Okay? So thank you guys once again. I'm going to open it up one more time. Do I have any more questions? All right, guys.
Gosh, I'm very nervous. Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. When you speak of bloodline, connecting with our ancestors, for instance, I do call on my ancestors, but I do feel at times that I want to know their names. Do they have specific names? Depends on where you're from.
That's a very good question. Let's go ahead and get the background muted because I hear feedback. But yes, that's a very good question. And let me first start by saying that you can have different names according to different languages that are spoken. So if you're concerned, my question to you is what is your concern? Is your concern that you don't know the name of your ancestors and that concerns you?
It's more so I feel at time when I do call on my ancestors, it just feel like I want to call out a name in order for me to feel to feel connected, or the nutrition that you talk about. I'm Haitian, and I do know certain spiritual names, but sometimes it's important to know because there are some that are bad, that are negative spirits, and then there are some that are positive spirits, and it's important to know which one you're calling on. And I always feel that if I knew the names, I would be content with my meditation of calling on my ancestors. Because when I do call on them, they do appear right away.
Okay. So I get a better understanding of what you're saying now. So number one, this is why the family tree is important. I'll take it on two levels. There's going to be the physical component of it, then there's a ritual level of it, and then there's like the application part of it. So let me explain from the physical sense. Due diligence. You may want to do some research and talk to the people that are within your family. This is why keeping a relationship with family members, grandmothers, grandfathers, uncles, aunts, great uncles, this is why it's important to keep those connections with those people and your family members so that you can sit down and have a one-on-one discussion with them and say, hey, look, tell me about Uncle Freddie. Tell me about Uncle, Jose, or tell me about Uncle this, or tell me about Uncle that. Because then they could give you an example. Tell me about my great-grandmother. Tell me about my aunt. Tell me about this. Because then they can start to give you some of the characteristic traits. They can give you some of maybe the vocational training or the job training that they had, what they specialize in, that type of information. Because that just on the basics, that's going to be important for you to know. If you figure out that Uncle JP was a physician or was an engineer, then you may know like, oh, okay, if I need to build something or I'm trying to create something, maybe I need to call in. It'll give you a better perspective of what's going on there. Second, on the ritual aspect of it is when you're calling on your ancestors, one of the things that I think one of the things we can discuss right now, just on the basic level of it, is that the names that you do know, and when you're speaking about those things, you're going to talk to your ancestors and tell them to specifically bring you the people that exist within your bloodline that are going to help you with the things that you need. And that are going to give you the abilities and the qualities and the characteristics that you're looking for in order to accomplish the specific task. Now, and in addition, let's say, moreover, when you're also concerned about the agreeable or disagreeable ancestors that you may be calling on, you're going to ask your ancestors to assist you and to help you. And that's one of the things. When you're tying into the chain, or you're dealing with the roots of your tree, the roots of your tree are going to work together as a unit. So when you deal with the extraction of these qualities and the characteristics as the roots are pulling these nutrients from the ground, they're working together as a unit. if there are elements that are taken in, then there are components that are within the tree that are going to be able to isolate that component and control it so that it's not able to affect the greater whole of that tree. And it's the same when you deal with the components of your ancestry. If there's a negative element that exists there, by you calling on your ancestors and by you saying what you're looking for, and then you're asking them to protect you and to look out on your behalf and to make sure that you're acquiring the attributes that you're looking for that are going to help you in the specific areas of your life, then you'll be able to control that dynamic a lot more. In addition to that, as far as you getting specific names and so forth like that, then there are certain rituals that are done in order to specifically identify names, in order to specifically identify ancestry that may exist around you that's going to assist you. And this is some of the things that we are going to discuss in the ancestral course. I would like to give some of that information out right now, and I have in the past, but I'm going to wait until this ancestral course. In the ancestral course, I'm going to specifically give ritual that is done in order for you to bring specific ancestors around so that they're able to identify who they are, so that you're able to get names, you're able to see images and symbolic identifying markers on who they are, so that it'll give you a clearer identity of these personalities and family members and spirits and personal guides and allies and so forth that exist around you, and that also comes from ritual. So there are rituals that are done that motivate those that are around you, ancestors specifically speaking, or the Wunonam, or the gods of your ancestors, to identify themselves. And then when they identify yourselves, you then would identify them by the way that they identify themselves. And many times, let me be clear, I don't want you also to get caught up. Yes, there is traditional language. There's always traditional language. There's always traditional tongue. There's always mother and father tongue. So they may have a specific name that was used in their in one of your ancestors' particular mother tongue or father tongue. But I would also like to introduce the concept that names a lot of times are really describing attributes. So sometimes your ancestors and sometimes those personalities and minds that you have that are around you, that are part of you, they may identify themselves, but they may identify themselves in a particular action. And it is that action itself that you're going to use in order to identify them or in order to call them. So if you know that in your dreams or in your communication, you are able to identify a specific identifiable marker or symbol that exists when you are calling on them, or that when you speak to them, or when you see them in your dreams, then you know that particular symbol or that particular identifying marker is then their name. Because after all, names are nothing more than identifying characteristics or traits or something like that. And that's why when you get into any particular language and you ask, well, what does this name mean? It means, oh, a noble person, or oh, it means a virtuous woman, or oh, it means the blacksmith's, husband, or oh, it means this, it means that. It's always describing actions. And when you understand the very concept of spirit, then you understand that's what spirits are. Spirits are action, meaning that spirits are the components of the mental. They are the effect of mental of mental attributes, meaning that you think something, or the earth thinks something, or something along the line, and then because of that thought, it creates this electrical gas. It creates this mind or this action that then takes on a component or a life of itself in order to complete a particular job or function. So with that being said, then you understand that they are action. You are an action. Your life and the things that you do, the things that you accomplish, it is action. The things that you put into action, the things that you put into motion, take on a life of themselves, and it becomes your legacy that you leave. This is why, people say, well, this person acts this. You have this personality trait. You have this personality traits and characteristics are all based on action. So my goal for you, or my goal for anyone that I would teach this information in the course, or you get any other teachings that come from some of our traditional perspectives, I would like you to focus not necessarily all the time on language, even though, let me be very clear, language is important, and let me be very clear, mother tongue in some cases and father tongue sometimes is very important. However, what's even more important is to understand what the action of that word is. Because if I tell you that a name means if I tell you that a name, a traditional name, if I give a traditional name, that is in the mother tongue, okay? If I say Konipagadolam Sapan, that is a traditional name. But when I say Konipagadolam Sapan, what am I saying? I'm saying the queen of the sea and her husband, the wonderful snake man. That's what I'm saying. I just said it in the mother tongue. So when I'm saying that name, I'm really just identifying a personality trait and characteristic that ultimately they exist, in nature. And so when you deal with your ancestors, like I was saying before, and this is what something that's this very interesting and that we can kind of get into, understanding the components of individuality, understanding the components of who you are and who you identify yourself as a person or as me, like I've been trying to explain with the concept of ancestors and so forth, is a combination of many different parts. And this is one thing that we haven't really talked about, in a lot of contemporary perspectives on self and identity. And they're just now starting to deal with a lot of these concepts in transpersonal psychology and a lot of things of that nature, where they're identifying that there are certain aspects of you, as far as your personality and your characteristic traits and who you are, that extend past your personal identity. So in that, what I'm explaining is that there are many parts of you that exist in various aspects of nature. And what I mean by that is that, so when you understand your ancestors, sometimes your ancestors, when they come to you, they are going to be identified with certain components of nature, because parts of them were parts of nature. And, so I think I'm getting a cue that I need to stop talking on those things. So these are the things that we'll discuss a lot in the ancestral course. We'll discuss, some of these things. We'll discuss ritual that's done, because ultimately your ancestors are going to be someone that's a part of you that's looking out for you, or that's looking out for your spiritual, welfare. Looking at on the behalf of, they're looking out on your behalf in the spiritual realm. So the foundation of who you are will definitely come from your ancestors, and that protection is going to come from your ancestors, in addition to the spiritual allies and the spiritual people that you have, on your behalf. So I guess that's the best way that I can explain that right now, in this setting. So I hope that helps you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, guys. Any more questions? Sister, I want to thank you. That's an excellent question. That actually gave me a chance to talk about some things that we're going to start discussing in the ancestral course. Okay, but I know I focused a lot on the ancestral course today, but also I want you guys to not forget the Becoming a Dream Warrior course. The deadline for applying is within the next few days. So if this is something that you're trying to participate in, then you may want to go ahead and go to the site, and you want to register there so that you can be a part of this first group.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, peace, brother. Just real quick, I had a question. I know you don't want to go into too much details, but can you give like a general synopsis of the Dream Warrior course, if you can?
Okay, so what I can give, which is appropriate, is that people that belong, or people that are joining this course, are going to get materials and supplies that come through the mail. There are going to be instructions that are given. We're going to have an open forum where we're going to discuss, the practical application, the procedural aspects of the materials that you're going to get. And the goal of that course is to identify, is for you to experience, and is for you to use certain observational methods in order to understand your dreams and your experiences in your dreams from a traditional perspective. And that's the best. That's what I can give, at this time. But that course is a course that's designed to explain to you how, in a traditional setting, how dreams are used, and how dreams are really nothing more than your personal connection to the spiritual realm or the spiritual dimensions of existence.
Thank you.
Yeah, and my goal in this course is to give you the materials that are necessary so that you can experience. And those experiences are going to come in a lot of different forms and a lot of different shapes. And not everyone will have the same experiences, but everyone that's a part of the course will experience. And they will have a story to tell. And we're going to discuss those stories. And we're going to discuss the relevance, of these things. And the goal here is that within a 2-week period, is that we cannot give everything in a 2-week period. We can't teach all the perspectives of dreams and their relevance according to traditional perspectives in a 2-week course. However, the goal here is to experience. My goal is that, and what I've come to know is that experience is key. And once a person is able to experience, once they're able to have their eyes open, once they're able to see or feel or experience the actual phenomenology, the felt experience, they can see it for themselves, then they're able to get an interior perspective of what's being talked about outside of the philosophical discussion. So this dream course is a course that is not a philosophical discussion. It's not something that we sit down and we talk about. Okay, we are going to have some conceptual discussions about the structure of perspectives and ideas in traditional practice on dreams and things of that nature. However, the structure of this course is primarily based around what you are doing. And what that means is that the ritual that everyone will be doing themselves, per the instructions that I give, and the experiences that the individuals who are part of this course that they share. And then really the next part of that is then discussing and talking about these experiences so that we could identify some of the phenomena, some of the phenomenology that's experienced, and so that a person could then understand the relevance of some of these things and how they relate to nature, how they relate to our own identity, how they relate to our lives, and how this knowledge can be used in order to give us a better spiritual connection. Other than that, brother, the truth is that what's offered in these courses is not something that can be talked about. It's only something that can be experienced. And when you experience it, then you know it. So one of the things that we are going to do is that we're going to have an open forum. We're going to have a public forum, and then we're also going to have a private forum. And some of the experiences in the dreams we will discuss, and some, with the permission of participants, we will give examples of some of the experiences so that people that don't share those experiences and don't understand those concepts may be able to get somewhat of an idea of what's happening there. And that's something that we're going to do, later on as the courses go on. So there will be some testimonials and so forth where you will be able to see some of these things. But I have to be honest with you. These courses are experience courses. It's about you experiencing it yourself and you having the internal idea and feeling and experience of what it is to experience dreams from a traditional perspective and understand the relevance of these dreams and how they may affect you in your life. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does, brother.
Okay. One of the things I also wanted to explain to you guys real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up everything. The goal here in a lot of these courses, we want to provide a space, and we want to provide a setting where people feel comfortable in their experiences, and we want to provide an environment where as a group, we are able to communicate, and we're able to create an environment where we're able to learn. And we're able to create a community where learning, the environment of learning, is the foundation of the principles that we stand on. So the goal here with a lot of these courses and a lot of these courses and classes is that we want to create an environment, a traditional village, as we speak, a learning community. A large think tank, as you would say, of traditional ideas. Our goal as IIKDS is to observe, to develop, to preserve, and in addition to transmitting traditional knowledge to future generations. So with that being said, our goal is to preserve the cultural identity and the spiritual practice of pre-colonial peoples and societies to future generations. So, our goal is to create many different think tanks that are designed in order to preserve, to develop, and transmit this knowledge to future generations. So people that are involved in these courses are a part of a if you want to look at nature, are a part of the animating factors that are responsible for pumping life back into ecology, into nature. When you deal with the spring season of existence, you have certain motivating factors, environmental conditions and so forth, that are responsible for reanimating the life that is seemingly dormant. And IIKDS and our groups and our courses and our various communities that we create, because we're about building strong communities. Our goal is to provide environments such as that, and that's exactly what our environment is going to do. They're a community. It's a home for people that are interested in cultivating that type of mindset, where we're able to come together as a community, we're able to share, we're able to learn, we're able to develop, because it's going to be important to take, and this is the important factor that's going to be extremely important for us to understand. Our goal here is not to learn the principles of nature identity. Our goal at IIKDS is to develop. Nature is always changing and it's always developing. So our goal is to also take the knowledge that we've learned, the observations and the methodologies that we've been able to structure and model and so forth, and we're able to take that in order to develop what's new in nature. Because there's a lot of new things that are evolving, and this knowledge is going to give us the ability to adapt to the new spiritual realities that exist within ecology, within the human conscious, so to speak, or perception, or these new things that everyone has been talking about, whether it be through monotheistic cultural perspectives or religious perspective, or whether it be through certain esoteric spiritual philosophies and so forth. Everyone has talked about the coming of a lot of things, and our goal is, in traditional perspectives, we always talk about the coming of the wet season of existence. Which, the wet season of existence is a time when there's more rain, and that this rain gives vitality and nutrients to the plants and so forth, so everything becomes green again. It's not as dry and wilted. And in the Western society, you can look at it kind of like the spring. So during the spring, things go from looking, from the winter, they go from taking on the appearance of death and not really having a life and vitality to then becoming vibrant with life and vitality and so forth. So our goal is to prepare for that, for the spring season of existence. From the time when there is more life and vitality, there's a stronger type of mind and vitality that exists within the environment, and making that connection with nature. So that connection to nature will ultimately help us to achieve a lot of the goals that have been talked about through a lot of monotheistic cultures, a lot of esoteric cultures, throughout. Everyone's talked about it in some way, and the indigenous also have a perspective of this. It's very closely related to nature, and then our connection to nature. And what I've really been taking the time the last hour and a half to talking to you guys about is that the real esoteric truth behind all these monotheistic religious expressions or belief systems has really always been about the intricate aspects of nature and the symbology and the analogies that are used in order to cover that up, but it's always been about nature. So our goal is to create communities and so forth that are going to provide this for you guys. Okay, so I really thank you guys for taking the time. You guys got up early to listen to this call. I thank you guys very much. And we will have a couple more calls like this in the future. I think when we introduce the ancestral course, I think we'll have another teleconference. Anytime that we introduce a new course, we'll have a teleconference about it, and we'll discuss it and talk about it, so that teleconference will be associated with the course to give you some general information about the course. And then in addition, I like to answer questions and so forth. So, there's always some additional information that's going to come with what's being said. So thank you guys for taking your time this morning, and make sure that you check the group on Facebook. We have the Google group coming up, and then also our website, www.iikds.org, and check out what we have at the University of Traditional Sciences. Thank you guys very much for taking your time. You guys take care.
Thank you, sir.